Welcome to Happy Trail, the podcast for trail riders. Episode 18, an interview with Mustang trainer Stefanie Skidmore. Hi, I'm your host, Jess. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Stefanie Skidmore, the founder and president of Wild Horse Outreach and Advocacy, better known as WHOA. Stefanie is a visionary leader with an impressive 30 years of experience training horses of various ages, breeds, and sizes across 2 continents and over 7 years dedicated almost exclusively to working with wild horses. As the director and trainer of WHOA, Stefanie brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise, having taught horsemanship for well over a decade. Her academic background in biology with a focus on animal behavior and husbandry complements her understanding of human psychology and behavior, gained through her work as a mental health therapist. This unique combination allows her to foster strong, healthy partnerships between wild horses and their human companions. In her free time, Stefanie enjoys expanding her knowledge of horses and horsemanship and exploring the Mountain West, ideally on horseback. She regularly embarks on backcountry rides and overnight pack trips with the WHOA Ambassador Mustangs, sharing these transformative experiences with the public. Through WHOA, Stefanie and her team aim to inform and inspire. They gentle and find suitable homes for once free-roaming wild horses, embark on backcountry pack trips, and share their journey to ignite awareness and respect for the American Mustang and our public lands. Their goal is to encourage compassionate, informed stewardship of wild horses, wildlife, and wild places, ensuring that they're enjoyed by present and future generations. Stefanie's dedication to WHOA is evident in every aspect of their work. I really enjoyed speaking with and getting to know Stefanie better, and I hope you will too. Really quickly, before we get to the interview, I just want to say to my longtime fans and anyone who's been listening to the podcast and noticed that there's been a gap in episodes, I have a special update and message for you at the end. So make sure to listen after the interview. Okay, here we go. On to the interview.
They're just not magically good at this. I think where the magic happens is in being realistic about what kind of riding people want to do, about what kind of horse that they need, and about, getting properly prepared. That is really, for me, my number one biggest thing that I try to drive home. The sky is the limit, but if you want to win a NASCAR race, you're not going to take a tractor. So, I don't want to promote Mustangs as this miracle horse because they are amazing. And I absolutely love that they're raw and that we get a very, very pure response from them. But I think that we owe it to the horse to be very realistic about these things and to set those horses up for success by not putting a square peg into a round hole.
Right. You don't want to over romanticize it. You want to keep it real.
It's not. Absolutely. That is really important for me. I mean, all of this, the post that I wrote the other day about the one person horse myth, all of that, it's romantic if you set it up for success, then it can be romantic. But if you go into that with some kind of preconceived, unrealistic notions, you're going to be disappointed and you're going to be doing a disservice to the horse. That is basically what I tell a lot of people when we do our initial talks about what kind of Mustang would you like kind of thing. I build what I do on integrity and on the fact that sometimes things go wrong, sometimes things aren't pretty, sometimes we struggle. And that is something that is really important to me, that's reflected, that this is not magic.
So where do you live in Colorado?
I live in Guffey, Colorado, which is up in the mountains on the eastern slope. And we're lucky to have a fair bit of riding pretty close by, and then we just drive out a couple of hours to get into the higher mountain.
And it sounds like you might have a German accent.
Are you? Yes, I am.
So are you from Germany originally?
I am, yes. Born and raised.
When did you move here?
In 2011.
And your primary focus is gentling Mustangs. How did you get involved in that?
A few years ago, it just seemed that everything pointed in that direction. I had been working with people with horses with problems. I had been debilitating horses on my own and been doing all kinds of training and spent all of this time trying to undo existing issues. And through my hay contact that was delivering my hay to me, he started talking about Mustang competitions that he was enrolled in. And I thought, well, that would be kind of fun.
When you're doing your training, what kind of things are you doing with the horses?
A lot of that depends on the individual horse. Basically, the first thing that I try to establish with the horse is two-way communication, meaning that the horse learns that I'm not just doing things to them or at them, but that the idea is that the horse does have a say and that the horse can communicate back to me and will be heard. So, for example, they learn that at the very beginning, when I entered the pen and the horse makes eye contact, the pressure goes away. And the pressure is me at that point. That teaches them that, first of all, it's a good thing to acknowledge the person. And second of all, starting with that and from there on out, there is always something that the horse can do to feel at ease again, because it takes them a while to really feel at ease in the presence of a person, to feel at ease being touched, being handled. So the horse learns a way of saying, hey, I'd like a break, please. And most of them catch on to that pretty quickly. And then we move to touch, either with a lunge whip or the braver ones with my hand. And the same thing. First, when the horse looks at the whip, it goes away. And when the horse touches it, it goes away. And so through our entire training process, the horse always has a way of saying, give me a break, please. So we call them stop signals, and I honor those. And teaches the horse that there's something else that they can do other than either fight or flee or just freeze up and take it.
That's so interesting. Now, are you also saddle training these horses?
Only my own. The youngsters that I have kept, I saddle train those. It's just, there's only so much time in any given day. And I really found that my niche is the gentling. I have amazing trainers that I can refer out to fairly locally here that will start them under saddle and do a good job. It's just what I see my role as being at this point is to, for one, also educate through creating content on social media and talking to the adopters and really finding those gentled horses suitable homes. And that honestly takes up enough of my time, because I'll have anything up to 6 wild horses in training at the house at any given time, plus my own, plus the psychotherapy work that I do.
Wow, that's a lot to have on your plate all at once.
How
many horses are you gentling a year?
Honestly, I'd have to count, but I think last year we did about 40. And by we, I mean that I have some amazing volunteers, some really, really great people that help me out with behind the scenes work, with chores, with also handling the horses once they're to the point that they can safely be around different people. The exact number depends on how quickly each horse is gentled, and also on whether or not the program shuts down for any reason throughout the year.
I see. It sounds like there's a fairly good amount of demand for Mustangs.
In my experience, yes, and increasingly so. I mean, I have worked to build trust and build a following, and I get more requests for Mustangs than usually what I have available. And pretty much when a Mustang nears the completion of tip requirements, for the most part, they are pretty much spoken for at that time.
Can you explain to me how the adoption process and all of that works?
Formally, from the official end, the way it works is that an adopter needs to fill out an adoption application, which is a very general document. It doesn't cost anything. It can be obtained either through the BLM office or the tip trainer. And that document, which asks for what kind of facility do you have, or are you able to use where you can keep the horse? What kind of trailer are you going to be using? What are you going to be feeding? Yeah, asked to draw a map of your setup and the location. And it asks a few personal criminal questions, criminal history, and those kinds of things. And then that makes a person an approved adopter through the BLM once they approve it for the type of animal or animals that they specify. So depending on your facility, that could be one or multiple animals, could be gentled or ungentled because the requirements are a little bit different. And once a person is an approved adopter, they can then request a specific horse. And the way they request a specific horse is by filling out what's called a PMACA, the Primary Maintenance and Care Agreement, which asks for the horse's identifying information, the freeze mark, and the signalment key. And at that point, the person will pay for the horse. And once the PMACA is completed and the horse has completed tip requirements, then that horse can be picked up.
So when you go and select horses for gentling, you don't necessarily have an adopter lined up for them. You're choosing the horse, and then someone from the public who knows you and knows of you finds out about the horses you're working with and chooses them?
A little bit of both. I mean, I sometimes have people contact me and say, hey, I am looking for this type of horse. So then when I go to pick horses, I may, keep those people in mind and then reach out to them and say, hey, this is the horse I'm bringing home. I don't know very much about him yet, but I think that animal could work for you. And then we definitely wait until we can get to know the horse. That is one of my biggest concerns, is to make sure that it's actually going to be a fit. Just because somebody wants a sorrel and I have a sorrel doesn't mean it's going to be a good fit. Just because somebody wants a gelding or wants a 15-hand horse or wants more of an eventing type horse, just because of all that does not mean it's a good fit. Just because somebody likes the pictures doesn't mean it makes it a good fit. So my personal interest is to make sure that it works out well for both the person and the horse.
Yeah, that's very important. Everybody has to get along. You don't want either party, the horse or the human, to be injured or traumatized in any way.
Or otherwise miserable.
Can you tell me a little bit about the traits of a Mustang and how much variability is there in the Mustangs?
The variability is huge. We have everything from self-gentling, horse-sized, essentially yellow labs that love everybody and that are sniffing you and wanting to be touched on the first day, to it takes 3 months to get a halter on. They come in all shapes and sizes. They come in any which conformation. They're all completely different. I have not yet met 2 horses that were alike or even all that similar. And that is another really big thing to be aware of when picking a Mustang. And what I usually tell people that contact me and want a horse, and I tell them, get clear about what you want. Get clear about what your goals are, and then we'll find you the horse. Because just because somebody likes that pretty bay doesn't mean that it's going to want to do what they want it to do. Because of that huge variability, it's really, really important that somebody knows these are the qualities that are important to me in a horse. This is what I will and will not deal with. Do I like a little bit more sensitive? Do I like really laid back? Do I want a curious horse, or do I want one that needs constant reassurance? I have seen quite a few horses that started out pretty sensitive and kind of scared and pretty quick to just turn and run. And then suddenly they let their guard down over time, either gradually, or there was just a day where they must have woken up that morning and said, you know what, this is okay. And all of a sudden you can do anything with them and they're super, super chill. You just don't always know that ahead of time.
What kinds of jobs and disciplines are your adopters using their horses for?
We have a lot of trail riders. That's, I think, mostly what I see. There's people that want to do some amount of trail riding. I have one that went to South Carolina. She is doing schooling shows, doing a little bit of jumping, doing some dressage. I have sent them off to be trail and pack horses in the mountain. One is an endurance prospect. That's basically, I don't know that any of them drive at this point, but there are people that I hear about where I've gotten feedback, largely trail riders, and then dabbling in other things as well.
Is there something about the Mustang that makes them a really great trail horse?
That, I would say, goes back to the individual horse. Business-wise, it would probably behoove me to say, oh yeah, you should get a Mustang. It's going to be the best trail horse you'll ever have. I don't know that I believe that that's true. It's just, what kind of traits do you select a Mustang for? And what kind of traits does the rider have? And because conformationally, they're also different. If you want to do some really rough riding, you need to pick a horse that physically is going to be predisposed to holding up well to that. It's just, it seems more to me that the kind of crowd that is drawn to the Mustang, a lot of them are recreational riders, are trail riders. And because I know that, and because everybody has a little bit of a different comfort zone as to how jumpy or not jumpy they want their horse to be, I asked them what kind of riding they're going to do and whether they're comfortable with a little bit of snorting or if they'd rather have a horse that just will bravely approach anything. I honestly think that just like with most horses, if I pick a horse that is naturally predisposed to doing well at what I want to do, and that is also going to be likely to mash well with my own personality, then I am likely to be very, very successful.
You mentioned that you have some of your own personal Mustangs. Can you tell me about them?
Yes, that's Lacey and Littlefoot. And then Tiny is not one that I gentled. Tiny came from a rescue situation. He is the older one. I co-own him. Lacey is a 5-year-old mare. She was actually born in holding to a Divide Basin mare. Divide Basin is an HMA in Wyoming. And then we have Littlefoot, who is coming 3. He was born and gathered in the wild in California in the Devil's Garden herd, Modoc National Forest. Lacey is the more sensitive one of the two, is the probably more athletic one of the two. She is my riding horse now after a couple or 3 seasons of packing. And then Littlefoot is just this big, laid back, curious, drafty guy that just now did his first season of packing and is going to very likely be started on the saddle this coming year. What they both have in common is that they're pretty curious. They have come to really like people, and they have what I call pretty good coping skills naturally. They don't and never were inclined to go headfirst through fences or have any really extreme initial reactions to being startled. And that is something that I personally pay close attention to, because I feel like the way that a horse acts within the first 2 seconds or so of being caught off guard tells you a lot about their personality, because it takes about a couple of seconds or so for learned behavior to kick in my experience. So I am looking for a horse that if we're in the backcountry or it's dark or we're by ourselves or we're moving cattle and all of a sudden there's a predator or there's wire or there's a backpack or a dog or a gunshot, a horse that in the first couple of seconds of something unexpected happening will not completely come apart and leave us in a big, gigantic mess in the backcountry that we may not be able to undo very easily without a helicopter.
Tell me some more about your packing experiences. How did you get into it, and what kinds of places do you like to go?
I got into it because years and years ago, I just developed an interest for going camping, which I hadn't done very much of because it's just not sort of what I grew up with. And at the same time, wanting to include horses. And somehow I came across the idea of horse packing, which is not a thing in Germany. And if it is, then it's not something that's widely known about or widely practiced. And so I started researching, and it's just something that caught my attention, and I started looking into more. And started out really basic, just in like nearby parts of the national forest with a pair of over the saddle panniers. So not necessarily a real packed setup, but just my saddle and then panniers that are designed to go over a saddle, and did a couple of overnight trips that way, just really basic with more camping gear and not really far in, and just to kind of get my feet wet, and because that's what I was able to and comfortable doing at the time. And I really wanted to learn how to really pack, and I wanted to learn about the gear because I wanted to be able to get further into the backcountry, into more remote locations than what you can do in a day ride, because you can ride in 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, but if it's a day ride, you're going to have to turn back and you're only going to ever get so far. And I wanted to learn how to do that safely. And so little by little, I started reading, I attended clinics, I started talking to people. And whenever I could, I found any which kind of mentors that were willing to hands-on share their experiences with me and just put one foot in front of the other, really. And finally leading up to me buying my first full packing setup back in 2018. And every year since 4 or 5 years ago, when I first got started, every year I've done a few more trips, gone a little bit further, and learned new things really on every trip. And where I like to go, I usually end up going into the wilderness. We have done some national forest and BLM land packing, even a little bit of national park stuff. I really look for places where we're going to be away from vehicle traffic, and also where it's not so restricted that you can't bring a dog or you have to stay in designated camping areas, those kinds of things.
Right. You mentioned the dog. Your dog joins you on all of your rides, right?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
How does he enjoy traveling long distances into the backcountry?
He seems to like it simply because, I mean, he is a German Shepherd, and if he can be with his herd and his people, then he's happy. He starts out the first 5 miles or so. He does zoomies and circles all around us. And then about after that, he falls in line behind everybody else and just follows along. And then he seems to like guarding the camp and just being with people and out in nature all day long. And I sure like having him because he is an amazing sleeping bag warmer. And he is vision impaired, so that's sometimes a little bit interesting, but he certainly can hear and smell. So having him in camp and warning if he feels that there's something approaching, there's something very comforting in that for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine, because in your area, you must be in some pretty serious bear country sometimes. Have you had any incidents?
We have seen pretty fresh bear scat, so I'm sure they've been around. On our pack trips, we have not seen one, although I wouldn't be surprised if they have seen us. We have bumped into moose. Of course, you'll see deer, you'll see elk. My personal least favorite encounters are hornets. Not because I have anything against hornets in particular. It's just sometimes if you don't see the nest and you get too close and you upset them, that can make for a little bit of an interesting ride.
Yeah, sure. A little rodeo.
Yeah. I mean, we've been lucky so far. The one horse that got into a hornet's nest, he actually stuck his nose in, like, what's this? Before the rider could actually pull him back and tell him that maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And by that time, they were out and not happy. But this was such a stoic horse that he was like, oh, well, I guess I better not be here then, huh? And that really happened. But that can be totally different with a different animal. But we have not had any problems with predators. We're not going out of our way to be stupid. We put our food either in bear boxes or in a tree away from camp. We always have a dog there. We're not trying to sneak around in the woods and sneak up on anything. So knock on wood. And I mean, granted, we're not in grizzly country. This is not or not yet big wolf country. So from my experience, anything that I know, we do have black bear, mountain lion, coyote. They have not given us any issues to date. And I also think that there's quite a bit that the person can do to prevent that and to peacefully use the backcountry alongside those who live there. Because it's us going in their home and not them invading our space as much.
Right. Are you always riding with other people when you go on these pack trips, or do you just go by yourself with the dog?
Typically on pack trips, anything overnight, I have at least one person with me, very seldom more than 2 or 3, just because the whole point is to have sort of the experience of quiet and nature, for me anyway. And also it takes a certain level rider, in my opinion, to do this. Somebody who has a horse that's in shape to do that, who themselves is in shape to do that, who has the gear to do these things and a good enough handle on their stock to get into the backcountry, not necessarily know what you're going to encounter, to be able to hobble or however you want to restrain them for grazing. The horse needs to stand patiently all night. I have just found in my immediate area not very many people that are either up for or prepared for this type of riding or both.
When you were first getting out there and learning, were there any mistakes that you made that maybe could have been avoided?
I am thinking. Yeah, definitely. You learn that you don't want to make any assumptions on how prepared your animal really is, and that you expose them to any and all of the factors and variables that they're going to be exposed to out there. If they have to be good and comfortable with the pack saddle and all the straps and attachments that hang on it. They have to be good and desensitized in all those areas where that equipment is going to be touching. So just because a horse is like super laid back and you can put a saddle on and you can hang any which weird object from the saddle, that does not mean that they're going to take kindly to a britchin and that pressure around their hind end. Only because a horse is okay with milk jugs and pool noodles and plastic bags means that does not automatically mean that they're going to be okay with the sound of canvas tires, for example. So we had a pretty epic, what in the packing world called a yard sale at Tree Line, when a horse decided, you know what, this is stupid. I don't like canvas tarps. I don't like panniers. I don't like anything. And I carried the stuff up here and I'm not carrying it back down. And that was much less the horse's fault than it was an error on our part in making assumptions as to what that horse was prepared to do. And turned out that there were certain parts of the equipment that the horse was just plain scared and distrustful of, that a few sessions of focused attention could have absolutely taken care of. You learn to pack lighter as you go. You learn to adjust the pack saddle and all that just to what you need. You learn what you really do and really don't need. You learn to bring seconds of things that you would be really sad if you were without, like your stove. And we have not had any big major, oh my goodness, this was really, really stupid. It's just more a matter of fine tuning. I also attribute that to the fact that we do a lot of homework going into this, a lot of planning, a lot of list making, a lot of reading up on stuff, a lot of learning about the area beforehand, a lot of practicing now and preparing with the horses to make sure that we don't throw them into something that they're not ready for. And that the people that I go with, I choose pretty carefully. And I think that makes a big, big difference in basically facing and enjoying the backcountry safely.
It sounds like maybe somebody forgot to pack the stove one time.
Well, thankfully that didn't happen, but one of the stoves died. And we had a second one, but it was just one of those things where if there had not been a second stove, because it was the three of us sharing one pack horse, so it would have been very easy to say, you know what, just for the sake of having a little bit less gear, and it was a teeny tiny backpacking stove, but just for the sake of having a little bit less gear, why don't we just take one stove? And that would have just been very sad. And the other thing that you learn, or that I have learned, I like to be warm and comfortable. So for me, it's totally worth investing in good quality clothing that I can layer and where I can stay dry. Because to me, that is not, I'm all for roughing it in the backcountry and sleeping on the ground and all of that kind of stuff. But cold and wet is not something that I want to be for 3 or 4 days straight.
Yeah, I understand that completely. I'm a rock climber, and sometimes we get stuck in situations on the side of a rock where it's maybe gotten a little bit shady and there's a breeze, and I usually always bring some kind of jacket wrapped around my waist, even if it's hot when we start out, because I have a very low tolerance for discomfort.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I mean, the other thing too is if something were to happen, you don't need somebody getting hypothermic on top of her.
Of course.
Sure.
So, what is your preferred method of containing the horses when on pack trips?
I personally, at night, I highline, and during the daytime for grazing, I hobble. That's not to say that those are superior methods to building a little corral or picketing during the day. It's what works for me. It's what works for the country that I pack in, and it works for the horses that I have. My old mare, I could fence her in with shoestring, but my young mare, she thinks that an electric fence is pretty laughable. So if she were out of grass where she's standing, she would have absolutely no hesitation to just walk right through an electric fence. And then as far as the picketing and the hobbling, we're on very rocky ground. And I don't know that I could necessarily always safely picket. And it's not something that I have what I would consider sufficient experience in training a horse to do. And I've not had the need. So I hobble. And what I do is I 3-leg hobble, because all of mine can run like the wind with hobbles on. So if they decide, oh, the grass half a mile down that way looked pretty good, or maybe it's time to get back to the trailer, or oh, maybe somebody's got a camp somewhere 2 miles down the trail, why don't we go see them? I really like knowing that my animals are still going to be pretty close by, because sometimes when you're cooking, you're not constantly sitting there and watching the horses. And I have found that once they're used to the 3-leg hobble, they have the 3-leg hobble on, then they just do what the point is of the operation is to stay in an area and graze. They can still move around. They can still get to new grass. They can get to water, but they just can't take off like a rocket running down the trail. Because that's a major oops when you're 8 miles into the backcountry and your horse takes off. It's as unsafe for the horse as it is inconvenient for you.
How did you train your horses to hobble like that?
I have found that most horses really take really, really easily to hobbling. A good way that I have found is to obviously start in a securely fenced area and start with a leg rope and get them used to leg ropes, preferably on all 4 feet, to the point where you can pick up the foot, where you can even lead them by a foot and lead them by each foot. And then they learn that if there's pressure, you don't have to freak out. It's just that you feel that pressure, you yield to it, and you think of yielding. And you don't feel like, oh my goodness, my foot's confined, I'm going to die. So once they're comfortable with the leg ropes, I have found that they're pretty well ready for the hobbles to go on, and we're still in a safely enclosed corral around pen, ideally with either grass or sand, something soft that in case they were to stumble, we're not causing any injuries or abrasions. And then I carefully put the hobbles on. And obviously, you don't ever want to stick your head underneath the horse when you're putting hobbles on or when you're doing anything else near the horse's foot. And then you step back and let them figure it out. And by that time, it's usually a matter of a couple of hops, and then they're fine because they have been prepared. You can also, if you're so inclined, you could put out a little bit of hay so that the horse could go, well, I guess I can't go anywhere, so why don't I eat? So where they have something else to focus on besides the fact that, well, I guess my legs are tied together. What the heck's up with that? And when I first hobble a horse, I don't put anything in the super tightest setting. I want them to be able to pretty comfortably place their front feet and not feel any more restricted than they need to be just to get the experience. If I have one down the road that's a real wiggler and always going somewhere and getting everybody else stirred up and hopping over somewhere and just to start playing with or nipping at another horse, well, then I might tighten things up a little bit. But just to teach them, we're leaving that pretty loose and pretty comfortable without them having to make huge accommodations for the hobbles. And then I get them to where they're comfortable with the 2-leg hobble, usually 2 front legs. And then if it looks like, and usually eventually they figure it out, if it looks like they're moving around quite a bit with their front legs hobbled, which they can run just as fast as without any kind of hobbles, then I will add the 3-leg hobble. And again, I start with a longer rope and then I leave it as long as the horse can responsibly handle and short enough so that they A, don't get hurt and get tangled up, and B, don't just leave. And that what exactly length that is depends on the horse, depends on the size of the horse, depends on the stride length of the horse. So I have found that if I do my preparations carefully and gradually, I can prevent a lot of wrecks from happening, for one. And 2, have horses that are gentle enough that if something weird were to go on, that I can get them out of the bind that they're in, because they're used to being handled, they're used to ropes around their legs. And so they're pretty easily approached, even if for some reason they did anything goofy with their hobbles and you needed to go help them. I don't like leaving horses unattended for long periods of time with hobbles, 2 or 3-leg hobbles, just because of the inherent risks of it. But for what I do, it has served us really well. And I have also not had any problems with chafing and raw spots on their legs from the hobble.
Wow, that was a lot of really great information. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I aspire to one day take my horses packing, and mine do respect electric fence, but hauling all of that gear out into the backcountry when you want to be ultralight packing is not very easy. So I've been trying to become more comfortable with the idea of hobbling and learn more about it. So I definitely appreciate that.
You're welcome. And then for nights, I personally don't hobble at night. Like I said, that's when they're highlines. Some of mine that will paw, they're hobbled at highlines. But I mean, highlines, you can make that a pretty lightweight setup too. And I have a friend who brings a solar-powered electric system into the backcountry. And if you otherwise pack pretty light, or if you have multiple pack horses and you're more comfortable with that, I really don't see much wrong with it. The only caveat I see personally is, so if you fence off their little corral and say the ground's wet, and obviously they'll be moving around, they'll be grazing, they'll be rolling. Part of what our responsibility is out there is to adhere to any kind of reasonable leave no trace policies, because that's how we continue to be allowed to take horses in the backcountry, and also because we don't want to pick up other people's trash in the backcountry, and other people don't want to see our damage and overgrazing that our horses have done. So a big part of taking horses in the backcountry, from my experience and also in my opinion, is to do it responsibly and do it low impact. We don't camp in areas that are already overgrazed. And we're very careful that when we highline any kind of disruption that our horses cause, we clean that up. If there's manure, we spread it. We don't let them dig gigantic holes. That's why mine are hobbled, the front legs hobbled at night when they're highline, because they'll get bored, they'll start pawing. So the electric setup can work really great. It's just a matter of making sure that you move it often enough and you don't put it in any kind of really sensitive soil.
Right. That's a very good point.
So it adds comfort for the horse. If you can leave them loose like that, it's just, again, this is not so much about right and wrong. It's about what works for you, what works for your horses, and what kind of country are you going in.
The last thing I would like to talk to you about is your nonprofit. So
Okay.
could you tell me a little bit, could you tell me a little bit about the nonprofit that you recently started?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for asking. It is called Wild Horse Outreach and Advocacy, WHOA for short. And our goal is, and our mission is to both inform and inspire. So my goal is not to be another Mustang sanctuary because for various reasons, I don't have that kind of land. And it's just not right now where I see myself making the most impact. What is important to me and I feel needed is to put information out there. And I'm happy always to share that for free. And I do that quite a bit on social media of things that I learn about Mustangs. And I hope that with that, I can have a bigger reach than through just the horses that I can gentle because, there's exactly one of me and only so many hours in a day. So if I can offer the people that are at home already with their adopted tip Mustangs, with Mustangs that they rescued somewhere, with Mustangs that they adopted and gentled themselves, if I can, or people that are looking into adopting Mustangs, I feel like if I can give them some information about what to expect, what to look for, what to maybe stay away from, what to do in certain situations, what's basically normal for certain horses, what to look for in a Mustang if I'm doing this for the first time and I don't quite know what I want. I feel like I can help many, many more horses get and keep a good home and more people set themselves up for success by hopefully picking a horse that's a good fit and or working through any kind of existing issues with the horse that they have. And that's the inform part. The inspire part is basically showing what is possible. I personally do that through the gentling that I do and through the work that I do and the fun stuff that I do with my horses in the fields that I am most drawn to, which is the backcountry riding, which is cattle work. Not that that's superior to any other disciplines. It's just that is where my passion lies. And I'm happy to share that with people to say, hey, you can take these wild horses and to wild places. You can have amazing experiences. It is not rocket science. You just want to be well informed. You want to be well prepared. If you have a dream that you want to accomplish with a Mustang, prepare yourself, pick a horse that's suitable for the job, prepare together, get a mentor, get the information you need, and go do it. That is really, really important to me. And also to normalize struggle, because it's certainly not always sunshines and unicorns and rainbows either. But that is really where, hence the outreach and advocacy, that is really where my focus lies. And I believe that what the wild horses and the wild places have in common is that if we want to preserve them, we need to be good stewards of both. Of the public lands, of the open spaces, of the wild horses on the range, and also of the wild horses that have been gathered and are no longer living in the wild. Because coming from Germany, where you don't have these things necessarily, I feel that much more acutely aware of this not being something to be taken for granted.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this amazing work for the Mustangs. Where can people connect with you?
Usually the easiest is on social media, either Facebook and Instagram, both. Usually Stefanie Skidmore. You can find me. The only interesting thing is that whatever causes confusion is that it's Stefanie with an F, Stefanie. And then my training page is Stefanie Skidmore, Trust Your Journey, Making Mountain Mustang Memories. The website for the not-for-profit is still very much under construction. That's going to be wildhorseoutreach.org, but wildhorseoutreach.com will get you there too. The most immediate way of getting in contact and seeing what we do and asking questions is going to be both Instagram, and that is Stefanie.Skidmore, and on Facebook, what I just said. And I would just ask that if somebody really wants to get in touch, send me a message. I don't bite, I'll respond. I'm always happy to set up a time to talk on the phone when I don't have time to respond at link. What I sometimes don't catch is comments. So if somebody has a question, wants to ask about anything related to the backcountry and to Mustangs and this kind of work, I'm always happy to talk to them and hopefully get them closer to where they want to be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Stefanie, for sharing your incredible journey and the impactful work that you're doing through wild horse outreach and advocacy. It's inspiring to hear about the differences WOA is making in the lives of wild horses and their human partners. For those of you listening who want to get involved and learn more, Wild Horse Outreach and Advocacy offers a variety of programs and services. They do Mustang gentling and horsemanship intensives, gentling demos, off-site clinics, one-on-one coaching calls, backcountry riding and packing workshops, and of course, you can always volunteer at their facility. I really appreciate Stefanie and the time she took to share with me. I think she gave us some valuable insights into Mustangs. If you're interested in any of the programs that Stefanie offers and want to get involved and support WOA's mission, be sure to reach out at info@wildhorseoutreach.org. Together, we can make a difference for the American Mustang and our public lands. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Hey, thanks for sticking around. This is a special message for all of my longtime fans and supporters, and anyone new to the podcast who noticed that there was a large time gap between episodes. First off, I want to say that I'm really happy to be here with you again after taking such a long hiatus, but I think I owe you an explanation. Over the past 2 years, I've been dealing with some really personal challenges, including my father's illness and his passing at the end of 2022. Losing my last parent and subsequently selling my family farm was really hard on me. It has been a challenging and emotional time for me, and I needed to take a step back and try to take care of myself. I'm still working on getting back to normal and happy and the person that I was before, but it's a work in progress. Additionally, I got really burnt out from doing everything for the podcast on my own. When I first started it, it was a lot of fun learning new skills, but after about a year, the tedium of editing got the better of me, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. It just got to be too much. Every time I sat down to work on the podcast again, I got totally overwhelmed and the task never got completed. So I finally broke down and decided to bring on an editor to help with the workload. This will allow me to focus on creating the show without the overwhelm of editing, and I really think that it's the only way I'm going to be able to produce content consistently. I also added the podcast to YouTube. In case you don't know, I have a channel over there called Ride Climb, where over the years I've posted videos of some of the places we camp and ride and stuff like that about our traveling lifestyle. So that's kind of where the video version of the podcast is going to live. And since now it's going to be a video podcast, it needs to be a little bit more interesting than just watching me talk or watching two people on Zoom talk to each other. So that's where an editor comes in and is going to be a big help, because we're going to add B-roll of the trails that people are talking about or places that I travel and want to talk about. So it'll just be a little bit more interesting and engaging, but a lot more work that I can't possibly do on my own. So as you can imagine, this comes with significant additional costs. And I'm paying my editor out of pocket since I don't have sponsors. And I really, really hate ads. So I'd like to keep it that way. I don't have deep pockets, so I can only fund this podcast for a few months. If you enjoy the show and would like to support the project, there are a few ways that you can help. I've created an account on Buy Me a Coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/rideclimb. And you can make a small contribution there to support the podcast if you feel inclined. That would help a lot. Additionally, over the last winter, I flexed some artistic muscles and came up with a ton of horsey designs that I'm putting on t-shirts and mugs and other things that would make great gifts. And I'm selling those on Etsy, where my shop is called Bangtail Clothing. You can find it at bangtailclothing.etsy.com. There will be a link in the show notes, obviously, for all of this. But over there, I have a few designs up right now that I think are pretty cute. And then I have a huge list of more designs that I just need time to work on and put out into the world. So more will be coming in the future. And I really do appreciate any support that you can throw my way, whether that's a small contribution or purchasing an item. It means the world to me and helps keep this content going. I really appreciate you understanding my hiatus and sticking with me through it. I truly, truly appreciate the support and encouragement that so many of you have offered me. Every single message, comment, and email has meant the world to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being such an amazing community. I love you all. And that is all for now. I will see you in the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.